experiencing in all of these different ways. So how is it when we start with ourselves? So Emily's going to talk a little bit more about that. Take a moment to really think about, are you your best friend? Right? What is your connection with yourself? Is your heart open to yourself? Is it open to the people in your lab group? Is it open to everybody in this room? Do you love the earth? Do you greet the sun? Do you celebrate with gratitude? So we're going to talk a little bit about that now.
Yeah. So thinking about our relationships with ourselves and our relationships with nature, right? We are made of the same types of atoms and chemical compositions as a tree right outside on the street. We're just rearranged a little differently, right? But we're all made of the same stuff. So technically, we all are nature, and we are in relationship with nature. And by that extension, other humans as well. And so these are all pictures that highlight people outside and who are in relationship with nature. And your relationship with nature is going to look differently depending on your cultural background. However, yes, sorry. Brain freeze. So this is where also radical self-love comes into play. We were talking about relationship with ourselves. Someone that I look up to who does a lot of theorizing and conceptualizing around radical self-love. Her name is Sonia Renee Taylor. I don't know if any of you have heard of her before, but she does a lot around self-image, body image, things like that with self-love. And so so how can we think about how we love ourselves and how we love nature? Do you want to click?
Oh, sorry. I can, okay.
Yeah. So these are a couple quotes that I came across a while ago. This first one over here, this is by a queer author in LA. And they did some artwork above around a quote from an Octavia E. Butler novel. And the quote is, "We shape the universe, we change all that we touch changes us, and the universe shapes us." And so that kind of highlights how interconnected we are with not only each other, but the universe and with nature. This other quote over here on the right for y'all, that is by Joel Leone. He's a writer for the New York Times, and he writes a lot about love. Highly recommend following him on Instagram. And he writes that this life is not about wins and losses. It is about our collective healing and journeying. It is about recentering love into our hearts and minds. It is about moving intentionally towards a higher state of being and reimagining this worldly existence into a godly one. A godly existence being how you would think of that. And so these two quotes really highlight, I think, two important ingredients to a relationship with ourselves and with others and with the environment, and that's interconnectedness and love. And if we don't center those two things, then that it's going to be a lot harder to heal those relationships and close that space. Oh, where's the rest of it? All right, and so when we think about climate change, this gets a little bit more into my work. So I do research with emotions and climate change. And so when we're thinking also of not only just our mind and like concepts around climate change, but also like how we feel about it, our hearts, our spirits, our connectedness, our relationships, how can we start to move beyond just this like conceptual understanding of climate change. And so we can think about emotions. And that is also part of your relationship with yourselves. And so I would like y'all to take a moment to discuss with your groups, if you feel comfortable, how do you feel about climate change? This sweet spot because the lights are like on either side of me. Sorry, that's why I'm like.
You stay right over there. You are doing you. That's perfect. Not sure why there's a mass exodus right there, but we won't take it personally. I hear kind of the conversation dying down a little bit. So, would anyone be brave enough to share with the whole group maybe some of your feelings? It can just be one word or 2 words. Just to kind of see what feelings are in the room right now.
I'm going to be really honest, I feel like absolute shit right now. Is that okay?
Yeah, really brave person in the back. Thank you.
Hello. I unfortunately think that climate change nowadays has turned more political than anything, and I think some political higher-ups use it to their advantage to make us think and feel certain ways.
So what is that? What are you feeling around that?
What are your feelings?
For instance, like certain political parties will stress climate change and say the pros and cons about it. And then, for instance, they'll put a giant construction in Alaska that's going to kill a ton of wildlife and change our climate. But I think as we see, people are becoming more woke to this.
Okay, yeah, you do touch on a good point. Emotions are political, and they are mediated and regulated between people. However, you have to kind of determine for yourself how you feel about those things. And yes, they're done in relationship to other things, but everything is inherently political, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I mean, that is, all emotions are valid. It just depends on what you do with them. Thank you. Anyone else? Is this a hand up? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I feel scared about climate change. Like, it's a really relevant issue within our lifetime that we need to step up and take action towards, because if we don't, there may not be a next lifetime for future generations. So I feel like we all should do our part to educate ourselves on how we can take action and just make the world greener so that we can sustain life.
Yeah, thank you. Are we snapping? Yes. Okay. All right. Maybe one more person? Yeah, up here in the front.
There's a microphone coming across.
Oh, okay.
There might be 2 right here in front, I think.
I feel kind of disappointed, to be honest, like with the leaders of the world. They kind of have a lot of the power of what they could do in the future, but turns out I don't know. So it's like, I think like climate change kind of connects to everything, like around the world, political, social, like economics too. It's like if we have a natural disaster, like like a big tsunami or something, Florida is gonna wipe out the economy, like everything within it. So I don't know, just feels kind of disappointing.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah. There's someone right behind you, I think.
Okay.
You want to pass it back? Yeah.
I feel pretty helpless when it comes to climate change. I know there's stuff I can do on a small scale, like recycling and choose more sustainable options, but even if I do that, there's so many people that aren't, and there's all these big corporations that continue to produce and produce, so it feels like no matter what I do, it doesn't matter, basically. And I worry for like my children's future, like even if nothing happens in my lifetime, it will affect their lifetime, and that's a scary thought.
Yeah, no, it is really scary. Thank you for sharing. So we have a few emotions that were mentioned: scared, disappointment, overwhelming. And so that is just, yeah. So we're going to talk about like all the different ways that emotions can exist in regards to climate change, but I wanted to go over what eco and climate anxiety is, and I was wondering if you could raise your hands if you've heard of one or both of these terms at all. So I see a couple people. I know it's in the media. Okay, so a few people. So of the people who have heard it, does someone want to maybe feel brave enough to share what the definition of it is? What they think it is? Sorry, it's hard to see everyone. Okay, I can just go ahead and share a definition. So, according to the APA, which is the American Psychological Association, so there's a lot of work being done in the psychology field right now in this. I'm in education, so that's a separate story. But, so it's concern about climate change, which can be like nervousness and worries about climate change. There is a little bit of a nuance. The field really hasn't quite narrowed down an exact definition, like an operational definition of either one of those yet. But what we're going on so far is that eco-anxiety is related to ecological crises, whereas climate anxiety is related specifically to climate change, and not that climate change can't cause ecological crises. Those two are very interconnected. But in the media, those two terms are used interchangeably at this point. And so right now it's seen as like worry and concern, and that can manifest as other emotions as well. So like fear, anger, stress, apathy, things like that. Mm-hmm. Do you wanna? Mm-hmm. And so there's other emotions, despair, grief, overwhelm, fear, anger, uncertainty. A lot of these were expressed out loud to the large group. I'm sure a lot of these emotions were expressed in your small group talking. And I just wanted to highlight two researchers who are doing some work in this field right now. So on the top we have Jennifer Uchendu. She's a Nigerian activist and researcher with emotions and climate change. And she does a lot of work on how like your emotions are different based off the circumstances that you've grown up with or your cultural background. So you can be worried or concerned, you can be disappointed, but some people are really pissed off. They're angry, they're frustrated, they feel like the government isn't doing anything, or I'm not saying that you feel that, but, and it also kind of depends on if you live in what we call the global north or the global south. Are you experiencing things on a day-to-day basis? Or are you, like lack of water, food, resources, things like that? Or are you more just sitting with this more like existential, like the world's gonna end? And both are completely valid, but again, it's what do we do and how do we process these to make a better future and to take action. Can you click on that? Mm-hmm. And so a little bit about like how, like why these feelings are so overwhelming. So there's the researcher, the picture on the bottom, this is Blanche Verley, Australian researcher, and she talks about in her research how we are processing the future and the world we were told we were going to have, or we see our grandparents or our parents or our guardians, like older people in our lives have, and what they say that we can have, and then what we're being told that we're going to have by the scientists. And like the PCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, just came out with their most recent report. I don't know if any of you have read it, but it is a little disheartening, but we can take action, but a part of that is these emotions that we have and like processing, so we can get to a point where we can feel like we can do things and be successful and be hopeful and have active hope. So it's not just like, oh, I hope the world's going to get better. It's like the world's going to get better because I am doing something about it. And so I have I had a couple little tips and tricks for y'all to get started on how maybe you can like deal with these emotions. It's gonna look different for everyone. Like I said, emotions, it really depends on your circumstance and your cultural background. And so some things that I've come across in my research that help are to focus on the things that you love and hope not to lose. So really engaging that sense of like trying to protect something, that can really help keep it positive instead of not focusing on like losing something, right? If you focus on like, what can I save, what can I protect? You can find other people to talk to about this, making sure that it's a safe community for you to talk about, but normalizing, validating these feelings. If we're not talking about it and creating space to process these feelings, we're not gonna go anywhere really, at least not anywhere fast enough that we need to go. So with regards to action on climate change. Collective action is key. I know individual action is still really important for you to live out your own values. However, a lot of these issues in climate change is due to systemic issues, in my opinion, and collective action is really where it's at. So talking to people, finding that community that you feel safe with, that you feel like you can all gather around something that's important, that you want to protect, and taking action on that. Also, there's been a ton of research out there to show that getting outside and connecting with nature is really beneficial for your mental and your physical health, even if that's just like sitting on a bench like in the middle of campus and looking at a tree for like 15 minutes. Don't worry about what other people are going to think of you. It can actually really help because like our brains have evolved with nature and different patterns, so we build things at right angles a lot, and that actually stresses our brains out. Whereas like, I don't know if any of you have seen pictures of like a lung and like tree roots and how it has a similar pattern, like the arteries in your lungs, and that those patterns are similar for a reason. And so when you look at a leaf or you look at water, it has these like fractal patterns that actually decrease stress in your brain. And then the last piece is to just remember that no one's perfect, and you're, just to try your best, and your best is going to look different on different days, and to really have grace with yourself, and just know as long as you're trying your best, and you're talking to other people, and you find people that, we're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. So we've looked at the idea of balancing, and that's, I think, something that Emily is talking about, the idea of putting these pieces together and using them in community, in conversations, and then also with yourself when you go out and look at that tree or find that sweet spot on campus, that you feel a sense of peace when you can just be outside and experiencing those patterns that are things that are much more about how we're hardwired than the buildings that we spend lots of time in. And so when we appreciate or when we take in these kinds of places, thinking about Earth as our larger body, so how is it that we can sort of clear out the collective pollution of our thoughts and really get rid of those stories, or even just identifying what those stories are that we carry about ourselves or about the natural world, about other people, about our history and our culture. And finding then our voices, our real voice of originality, and the idea that we all have gifts to bring to this world and that they're all very different, right? We can do these things in different ways. My dad gave this to my son as a graduation gift. Don't try to fit in when you were born to stand out. So how is it that you can do this? How is it that you can find your place to stand out? How is it that you can find your place of self-acceptance and make those, whatever those inside dreams come true? We're only our real selves when we can bring that out to the world, right? This self-alienation, this disconnect is an epidemic. I don't know where, we're talking about what underlies these things, where these stories, this disconnect. We're not born with this self-alienation. It's something that becomes taught to us, shown to us. Kids don't suffer from it. So how is it? What should you do? This is where we're going to go in part 3 of the course. This is where we're going to go next week. What should you do? You might want to write these 3 bold questions down. What are you good at? What brings you joy? And what's the work that needs doing? That's where the meeting is, where the thing is that you should do, right? So these folks in Guatemala have this attitude that if a child is sick, then the family is sick. If there are several people in the village that are sick, then the village is sick. It's this collective consciousness that they bring to their worldview. It's impossible to say, I am healthy, but the village forest is dying. It's all this connection, right? So imagining what healthy really looks like and how we can extend that, how we can be part of that, how we can have this place where there's no separation, this place where we can say, all my ancestors are behind me. Be still, watch and listen. You are the result of love of thousands. So what is it? It sounds really kind of cheesy, and yet I think we're getting at something that's pretty deep. It's pretty human nature. So for this week's pack-back question, I'd like you to reflect on this. It takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. So with that, I send you out into the world to experiment. Be well. Have a beautiful day.